Welcome to Anews. I'm Umar Taslim, and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. On today's episode, Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, and political analyst, Dr. Abdunur Tumi, will be joining me to discuss the latest round of peace talks in Istanbul and the Israeli genocide in the occupied Gaza Strip, where the death toll has crossed 54,000. But before we begin today's discussions, let's take a look at this news report.
Türkiye, barış diplomasisinin ana merkezlerinden biri haline dönüşüyor. Az önce de ifade ettiğim gibi gayretlerimiz neticesinde Rusya ve Ukrayna heyetleri ülkemizde bir araya geldiler.
Turkey's presidential cabinet convened under the chairmanship of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in the capital of Ankara on Monday.
Benim en büyük arzum gerek Sayın Vladimir Putin'i gerekse Zelenski'yi aynı şekilde İstanbul veya Ankara'da bir araya getirmek, hatta Sayın Trump'ı da bunların yanına almak, eğer kabul buyururlarsa ben de kendileriyle bu buluşmada bir araya gelir ve böylece İstanbul'u adeta bir barış merkezi haline getirelim.
The Turkish leader added that concrete steps could be taken toward this ambitious diplomatic initiative following ongoing meetings, underlining his desire to transform Turkey's geopolitical location and diplomatic clout into meaningful contributions to global stability.
Türkiye'nin tavrı savaşın ilk gününden beri bellidir. Biz bölgemizde çatışma, kavga, savaş ve zulüm görmek asla istemiyoruz. Barışın kaybedeninin olmayacağına inanıyoruz. Her iki tarafın da kabul edeceği sürdürülebilir bir barışın tesisi için samimi bir çaba içindeyiz.
Welcome back to the program. Dr. Mehmet Çelik, welcome to the program as well.
Thank you, Mark.
Mehmet Çelik, we yesterday witnessed the second round of peace talks in Istanbul. Obviously, the presidents weren't there. Zelensky and Putin did not attend this meeting. The Russian side was represented by Medinsky, who's the lead negotiator, and from the Ukrainian side, it was the defense minister, Umerev Rostov. So, Mehmet Çelik, how are you looking at the meeting? We saw yesterday that it was a second round. We did not achieve a ceasefire, but obviously, Turkey showed the entire world that what it's capable of and that it can be the center of diplomacy. So, what were the key takeaways, Dr. Mehmet?
Well, first of all, I think compared to the first round of talks last month, there were more realistic expectations. In the previous round of talks, the hopes were very high for a ceasefire and a possible meeting between the leaders of the two sides, Mr. Putin and Mr. Zelensky, and with the possibility of Mr. Trump even coming to Istanbul as part of his Gulf tour. But of course, the glass was half empty in the first meeting. The prisoners exchange was agreed upon, and some documents were agreed to exchange. But nevertheless, I think both the first meeting and this meeting that took place yesterday, of course, they did not produce any substantial results with regards to a ceasefire. However, we still know that these things, especially for a conflict that is this big, it's not easy to achieve a ceasefire over one or two meetings when the sides are very firm, when both sides are very firm in terms of maintaining their maximalist positions, especially from the Russian side as the invader of the Ukrainian territory. So diplomacy will be the only solution to this problem. I think all sides agree with that. And the fact that a platform has been established, it's still one of the most significant part of this meeting. the fact that there is a communication channel between the sides and a diplomatic channel where the two sides can even, where this meeting is facilitating at least a meeting where they could put forward their proposals. When we look at yesterday, the Russian side, they delivered their proposal on the settlement of this crisis. But, I mean, to be very frank, the proposal is not very realistic for the Ukrainian side to accept. It's very maximalist in terms of territorial expansion, in terms of what they require from the Ukrainian side. On the other hand, the establishment of this new prisoners exchange, I think it's still a step needed for both sides. With regards to some of the children's name delivered to Russian side from the Ukrainian delegation, the abducted children, I think that's also it has a psychological effect for the Ukrainian side. On the other hand, the aggression that took place a day before this meeting, I think overshadowed, the atmosphere of the meeting. The Ukrainian attack on the Russian military facilities, which has a very significant material damage on the Russian side, as far as the reports suggest. I mean, it's trillions of dollars. Also, some strong damage to aircrafts. This also elevated the tensions right before the meeting, but I think both sides are still at the phase of that, and psychologically they're at a position where they see no compromise. However, if a ceasefire is needed, if a ceasefire is the desired outcome of these meetings, I think both sides will come to a realization that a compromise needs to be made, both from the Ukrainian side and also from the Russian side. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will be very hard to achieve any diplomatic solution. And military solution, by all sides, I think it's accepted that it is not a solution that will bring peace.
Dr. Mehmet, there are conditions. Ukraine says that we need a ceasefire without any conditions, but Russia says that we can achieve a ceasefire only if the West stops supplying military equipment to Ukraine. Now, I have this peace proposal issued by the Russian media, which is the official peace proposal. Let's look at the terms, Mehmet, because there are so many details in this peace proposal that I don't think that the Ukrainian government will be able to accept. Now, let's start with the first one, which is the international legal recognition of the incorporation into the Russian Federation of Crimea, the Luhansk People's Republic, the Donetsk People's Republic, and the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. Let's start with this. Ukraine has ceded this territory to Russia, but Russia is not in complete control of these territories. The second one is neutrality of Ukraine, implying its refusal to join military alliances and coalitions. Russia is saying that Ukraine cannot be a part of the European Union or NATO. Termination of all existing international treaties and agreements. Confirmation of Ukraine's status as a state without nuclear or other weapons of mass destruction. How do you analyze these first 4 points, which Russia says are the key parameters for a definitive settlement?
Well, first of all, I think in the first article with regards to territorial expansion and the recognition of this territorial expansion by the international community, I mean, I don't see that to be not only unrealistic, but I think it's also not fair to the Ukrainian side. And also, I don't think this will be accepted by the European Union or the European actors, as well as the Western world in general. First of all, even the annexation of Crimea is not yet recognized, the earlier annexation of Crimea. So if that's not accepted already, after all so many years, I don't think all these new regions will be accepted. It's recognized as the Ukrainian territory, regardless of the dispute, and withdrawal or at least recognition of these territory, I don't think that's a very realistic proposal. Secondly, when it comes to neutrality of Ukraine, If Russia or the international community accepts Ukraine as a sovereign state, as a sovereign country that can make its own decisions, I don't think it's I don't think it should be on the part of a third country or a second country to impose such or dictate such a proposal on a sovereign state. So I don't think this will also be something that could be accepted, because Ukrainians will want their sovereign decisions to be made by themselves, be it for their security or other realms of cooperation. Nevertheless, of course, it has been a very strong dispute between the Western world and the Russian side when it comes to Ukraine joining NATO, Ukraine joining the EU. We saw that with Sweden and Finland's joining the NATO bloc. But Ukraine is a different story than Finland and Sweden. There is historic tensions, and now there was a war. I don't think this will be also something that could be accepted by a sovereign state. And I could say the same thing for the third article as well. Nevertheless, Russian motivation behind all these articles is to solidify or to show that their position is not compromising. They will propose these, but at the end of the day, negotiation will continue, diplomatic exchange will continue, and eventually, I assume, if the sides want a ceasefire or a peace, both sides need to make some compromises from these demands that they have. Ukraine comes with a no condition, but there is a war, and Russia has already invaded some part of its territory, and it's not willing to move away. How this will come to a solution, if there is no meeting halfway somehow that is also mediated by the international community or the players that are closer to these both sides, or the powerful states like United States and maybe European actors on the other side with the influence over Ukraine, I'm afraid the war is not going to come to an end very easy.
Mehmet, let's look at the ceasefire conditions. Now, Russia has given two options to Ukraine. Option one says commencement of complete withdrawal of the armed forces of Ukraine and other Ukrainian paramilitary formations from the territory of the Russian Federation. The second option is, and now they've labeled it as a package proposal. So it says prohibition on redeployment of the armed forces and other Ukrainian paramilitary formations, cessation of mobilization and commencement of demobilization, cessation of foreign supplies of military products. Again, this was one of the main conditions that Russia has said, that if you want a ceasefire, you must end obtaining weapons from Western countries. Mehmet, apart from that, there's something else that I noticed. It says removal of restrictions imposed on the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. So it's also a religious battle that we see in Ukraine. And, furthermore, something that, has taken my attention is lifting of martial law in Ukraine and announcement of the date for elections of the president of Ukraine and parliamentary elections. Can Russia force Ukraine to do these things?
I mean, Russia can request that and demand that, but if we accept that sovereign states make their own decisions regarding their domestic affairs without the interference of the third parties or the other parties, outside parties, then this is not a request that Russia should be able to make. But given its military power over Ukraine, and given the fact that it has already invaded some Ukrainian territory, it is making these demands. But this is not something that I would expect. This is not something that I would expect the Ukrainian side or the Ukrainian people to accept as an interference in their internal affairs. When it comes to the idea about a sovereign state, it is the fact that they have this jurisdiction and territorial borders where they make their own. They have the authority to make their own decisions. If there is an external factor, an external actor trying to interfere, trying to influence the internal affairs of a country, then the question will be raised regarding the sovereignty of that state. And I think this is a problem not only for Ukraine, but it will bring a big question mark to the international recognition of sovereign states. If this is accepted today, another country can go and invade another weaker country and claim rights over their internal affairs. I don't think this is something that, again, will be accepted. Nevertheless, I find this to be very maximalist. I find this to be non-compromising for a ceasefire. Even withdrawal of our arms, especially with regards to elections, all these are. I'm not sure if there are demands that the Ukrainian side would be compromising from.
Mehmet, last week, when the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan was in Moscow, the Russian Foreign Minister made some interesting statements. He said that the European Union is ignoring the public interests and is increasing or extending this war for its own personal benefits. Do you think that statement is true to some extent? Do you think that European leaders are not listening to their public and instead moving to incorporate their own ideas into this war and they're playing for their own personal benefits?
I think when it comes to energy, when it comes to security, European public is not interested in escalating this tension. Nevertheless, with the shaping relationship between United States and Europe, I think Europe wants to establish its own military or security muscle under this, European security architecture. If it wants to do that, I think the European leaders, they see, of course, Russia a big threat, and they need to grow and further strengthen their military might or security defense mechanisms against this threat that they see from Russia. So economically, European continent is not very solid as of now. I mean, Germany, when we talk about their economic power as the big power in Europe, Germany is struggling economically. When it comes to energy, especially in winter months, they had a very difficult time. And the public is not very happy about that. European citizens are not very happy that they have not only a struggling economy, not only an energy crisis, but they do not want tensions with Russia as they fear of, the fear of conflict coming to their door. So there is that the discrepancy between how the European leaders, how the European decision makers see this conflict with Russia and the people in Europe. So that discrepancy comes from how I think the European leaders and decision makers want to take their place in the international arena without the support of United States now that is not there anymore with the new Trump era, for example.
Mehmet, let's take a look at what President Erdogan said yesterday. There was a cabinet meeting, and after that, he addressed journalists. He said that I really want all these leaders, Zelensky, Putin, to come to Istanbul or Ankara, and let's make this let's make Istanbul a place of peace, a place where these decisions can be directed from. So how are you looking at that statement, and tell me, how are you evaluating Turkish president's approach towards this war? And he also added that he would like to see President Trump join these talks, whether they would happen in Istanbul or Ankara, doesn't matter. But he wants all these three leaders to come together and find a solution. So how are you looking at Erdogan's diplomacy here?
Well, first of all, when it comes to conflicts in Turkey's region or even beyond, Turkey also always have this peace diplomacy approach where it offers its mediation as a strong international actor, and not only in its region but also beyond. So since the beginning of this war in 2022, Mr. Erdogan and Turkey has been, first of all, not accepting this invasion and has voiced that support for the Ukrainian side. But at the same time, it has moved on with its relations with Russia due to some pragmatic relationship Turkey has with Russia. When it comes to the conflict, since it has evolved, it has offered its mediation and its diplomatic closeness with both sides, so that this region this conflict can be solved through some peace diplomacy. We have achieved a previous prisoners exchange. The sides came together in Antalya previously, in Istanbul in 2023, I believe it was, or 2024, they got together. But European influence, particularly as it was reported in the media, Boris Johnson's, UK Prime Minister's influence over Mr. Zelensky halted the talks then. Nevertheless, a grain deal was achieved through Turkey's diplomacy, which is very important for the food security, international food security, and delivery of Ukrainian grains or wheat to the international market, as well as some of Russian products, agricultural products or pesticides into the international community. Peace and diplomacy go hand in hand. If there is no diplomatic channels open between the sides, they are not able to communicate with another. If there is no communications, they're not able to even talk about their agreements or disagreements. And Turkey believes that diplomatic channel should remain open between all sides that are in conflict. When it comes to Ukraine and Russia, Turkey has proposed Istanbul to facilitate these talks for since the beginning of the war, and he has been successful at hosting the sides. This is for actually the third time officially. The first round was a couple years ago, and then in May, the first round of the new talks. And then yesterday we had the second round of the new talks taking place. And Turkey and Mr. Erdogan, as a leader or as a country that has good relations with both sides, want to bring them together, because when the sides don't come together, they're not able to talk. And the Western world, Western supporters of Ukraine, they don't have that relationship with Mr. Putin as Turkey does, as Mr. Erdogan has this relationship with Mr. Putin. But this mediation and Turkey's growing influence actually as a mediator in international conflicts is not only limited to Ukraine war, of course. Turkey is also mediating in other conflicts. From Northern Africa to Horn of Africa to other parts of the world. Even in India, Mr. Erdogan very recently voiced his willingness to mediate between India and Pakistan, a conflict in Southeast Asia, but it has a very big regional implication, as two nuclear powers were facing or were confronting one another. That's also a historic dispute that has been going for many years. So Turkey, with its growing economy, growing defense capabilities, political influence, and strong leadership, it gives the image of a very strong actor that can mediate between sides. And Turkey has a very strong and very effective prestige when it comes to that mediation in conflicts, not only in its region, but beyond. If there is no winners in wars, there is no losers in peace. This is the approach that Mr. Erdogan voices very frequently. In wars, all sides, there is no winners. All sides somehow lose, either materially or in terms of civilian casualties, or in terms of their economies being damaged, etc., or when it comes to their borders. So when there is a peace, somehow, if it is a just and fair peace, then everybody wins from that agreement. And this is the approach, and this is what Turkey has been pushing forward for Ukraine since day one, when the Russian aggression against Ukrainian territory began.
Mehmet, that was an excellent analysis of whatever we've been seeing over the past 2 weeks involving Russia and Ukraine. Obviously now, when Turkey leads these diplomatic talks, like you just said, there are breakthroughs. Obviously, we can't reach a ceasefire in a matter of days. But, since we have these breakthroughs, like you said, the grain deal, then the exchange of prisoners, and now the exchange of children as well. So, that's an excellent analysis. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Mark.
Now let's take a look at this news report. We'll be right back.
Russia and Ukraine agreed to exchange more prisoners of war and return the bodies of 12,000 soldiers after peace talks in Istanbul on Monday. The warring sides met for barely an hour for only the second such round of negotiations since March 2022. But there was no breakthrough on a proposed ceasefire, which Ukraine, its European allies, and the US have urged Russia to accept.
Our proposal is an unconditional ceasefire in the air, sea, and land, at least for 30 days. This position has remained unchanged for the 3 months, and we consider it the basis for starting a peaceful resolution.
Russia says it wants a long-term settlement rather than a pause in the war. Ukraine says Russia does not want peace and that new sanctions are needed to force it to pursue a ceasefire. Following Monday's talks, Kremlin aide Vladimir Medinsky said Russian negotiators had handed their Ukrainian counterparts a detailed memorandum outlining Moscow's terms for a full ceasefire, and also suggested a short ceasefire to collect the bodies of dead soldiers. According to Russian media, Moscow said it would only agree to end the war if Ukraine gives up big new chunks of territory and accepts limits on the size of its army.
The third point in our agenda is a meeting of leaders. We firmly believe that all key issues can only be solved at the level of leaders. And the leaders' meeting could be with possible involvement of other leaders, such as President of the United States.
Welcome back to the program. Let's take a look at the front page of Daily Sabah. Mehmet, now the first headline that I'm seeing here is that the Turkish Petroleum has signed a partnership agreement with Azerbaijan's SOCAR and BP, British Petroleum. We all know about the relations between Turkey and Azerbaijan. Tell me more about this deal, Mehmet.
Well, first of all, there's, as you mentioned, we know all about the relationship between Azerbaijan and Turkey. Turkey and Azerbaijan have very strong relations at many different levels, especially with the leadership between very great relationship between Mr. Ilham Aliyev and Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Turkey and Azerbaijan sees themselves as one nation, two different states, given, of course, the historic background. But nevertheless, I think in the very recent decade, Turkey and Azerbaijan relationship has been expanding to many different strategic partnerships, be it in economy, be it in military and defense industry and military cooperation. As you know, Turkey has supported Azerbaijan in the very most recent conflict with Armenia. And this relationship between SOCAR and Turkish Petroleum, now the TPAO, it's defined as a strategic alliance in energy, as they will be exploring hydrocarbons in a new site close to Baku, offshore of Baku, in the Caspian Sea. It's a new Shafak Asiman offshore block in the Caspian Sea. This actually, it's one of the very joint strategic alliances in energy. But of course, Turkey's energy relationship with Azerbaijan is also, previously we have pipelines, Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan and Baku-Tbilisi-Erzurum, and there's also the Trans-Anatolian pipeline. So that strategic partnership, we can see that it is deepening in energy. And this is important. Why? Not only for the bilateral ties, and not only for the region in the Central Asia or Turkey's east, but it's also important for European security energy, where Europe's very highly dependent when it comes to energy. So in terms of diversifying that, and Turkey as a transit hub for energy, I think this is also a very pillar, one of the key pillars of this energy alliance or energy infrastructure that Turkey has been used. Basically, Turkey's geographic location is very effectively used so that they can be a transit hub between the energy sources and where the energy is demanded.
Mehmet, also, we were talking about how Turkey has this unique position in, bringing all these countries together and holding talks, facilitating these negotiations. Now, U.S. envoy, he has also said the same thing. Tom Barak says that Turkey has this unique ability for regional dialogue. Tell me more about this statement.
Tom Barak yesterday, his first televised interview was, broadcasted. Tom Barak knows this region very well, as he's someone actually, his background goes back to the Ottoman presence in the region. He's of the Christian Lebanese background. So he knows the history of the region. He knows the importance of Turkey for the region. And he has seen the evolution of Turkey's power to where it has reached today, compared to, let's say, 2 decades ago. This brings the acknowledgement or the acceptance of a new reality about Turkey, new reality about Turkey's power. He acknowledges that, and this is how I think this idea about new Turkey is conveyed to Mr. Trump's mind, given how Mr. Trump sees the importance of a relationship between Turkey and the United States and Turkey's influence in its region, be it in Syria or the relationship between Israel and the United States, and what this means for Turkey, for example. What does Turkey mean for Russia and Ukraine conflict, as we previously talked about, as a mediator? Turkey, that influence in its region as a strong actor, is now actually acknowledged realistically and accepted by the United States. And this is why I think Tom Barak highlights that point, and he knows that Mr. Trump has a very good relationship with Mr. Erdogan. Even in this previous term, Mr. Trump had despite some fluctuations, still had a very working relationship with Mr. Erdogan. And I think that acknowledgement, or at least being on good terms with Turkey from a U.S. envoy, I think it's a good start to Mr. Barak's new term in Ankara.
Mehmet, also, when we're talking about regional dialogue, we saw over the last few years, Turkey did not have a good relationship with countries like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Egypt as well. But what happened? What did we see later on? It was through diplomacy that they, mended their ties, and, they got back on talking terms, and then there were visits as well from lower levels and from the presidential level. Mehmet, thank you so much for that analysis. We'll continue to monitor all these stories.
Thank you, Mar.
Now let's take a look at this news report, and we'll be right back.
UN Chief Antonio Guterres said on Monday that he was appalled by reports of Palestinians killed and injured while seeking aid in Gaza. Here's UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric.
The Secretary General condemns the reported killings and injuries of Palestinians who were seeking aid in Gaza yesterday. It is unacceptable that Palestinians are risking their lives for food. The Secretary General calls for an immediate and independent investigation into these events and for perpetrators to be held accountable.
On Sunday, Palestinian and international officials said at least 31 people had been killed, and dozens more were wounded near an aid distribution site operated by the U.S.-based Gaza Humanitarian Foundation.
We've had a shooting at the GHF Aid Distribution Centre near Rafah.
British surgeon Victoria Rose said many of the injured were rushed to local hospitals, like the Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis.
These are all gunshot wounds, and as you can see behind me, we've got all the bays are full, and they're all gunshot wounds. It's absolute carnage here, and there are even more people in the main emergency department.
Local health authorities said on Monday that several more Palestinians had been killed or wounded by Israeli fire near the same site. The Israeli military said it was aware of reports of casualties, and the incident was being thoroughly looked into. On Monday, the military said in a statement that troops operating overnight in Rafah had fired warning shots to prevent several suspects approaching them, adding the incident took place less than a mile away from the aid distribution site. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a private group sponsored by the United States and endorsed by Israel, said there had been no fatalities or injuries at its distribution site or the surrounding area. The reported deaths and injuries are the latest in a series of incidents, underscoring the volatile security situation that has complicated aid delivery to Gaza, following the easing last month of an almost 3-month Israeli blockade.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now is Dr. Abdul Noor Toumi. He is a political analyst and journalist. Dr. Toumi, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on the show.
Dr. Toumi, let's start with the situation in Gaza. Now, 54,000 people have been killed in Israeli attacks in the occupied Gaza Strip. And there's a new Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as well, which has been distributing aid to war-torn Palestinians. But what we've been seeing in those videos and images from the occupied Gaza Strip, it has not materialized. There's still many problems. So why has this humanitarian disaster, why are we continuing to see this disaster unfold in the occupied Gaza Strip?
Actually, this so-called humanitarian operation, it has nothing to do with humanitarian per se. It's just or about the continuity to humiliate and kneel down the Palestinian people. Because as far as the noble term of the humanitarian action is concerned, is all about organization and a legal frame, logistic, and so on. Therefore, there is the Geneva Convention that is related to protection of civilians in wartime. So in this context, we don't say anything is related to humanitarian action or to let the Palestinian civilians get a bag of wheat or rice. So this is just the continuation of this carnage that has been taking place now for more than 600 days. And also it's the process of the policy of the ethnic cleansing. So now this carnage has gone from the policy of orchard policy to the starvation to humiliation. Because by the norms of a humanitarian action, there are 3 key elements. It's raising awareness, coordination, and then follow-up. And this is the job of the international NGOs and local NGOs who have been doing this, again, a noble action for decades. And this is why, as I said, the purpose of this GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, is actually the policy of the Messianic government and its prime minister is to substitute this organization with the UNRWA because they don't want to see anything goes. The UNRWA does because it is, according to them, it does actually reshuffle all their policy in Gaza. And the purpose and the goal or the strategic goal of Gaza, the Gaza Strip, is to push the people to leave Gaza in, again, the process of the ethnic cleansing and the reoccupation of Gaza Strip again.
Dr. Toumi, you're joining us from the French capital. Now, we know the sentiment in France as well. It has changed over the past few months. People are now on the streets in support. They're asking to, end the genocide, the Israeli genocide in Gaza, and they're supporting Palestinians more often now, as compared to what we saw when the war started. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron, he has floated the idea of the recognition of the state of Palestine. And later this month, there's going to be a conference at the UN where Saudi Arabia is going to join France. What can we expect from this meeting?
Frankly, we don't expect too much for the simple reason because the other side, the Israeli side, doesn't recognize even a people or place or a land it calls Palestine. I mean, this is the straight answer. Now, there was a process that was set actually 3 decades ago that started with Madrid Conference in 1991 and led to the Oslo Accord in 1993. Actually, who did employ this accord or this process? It's indeed the current Messianic government prime minister. So the Israelis, they don't want, I mean, they don't, again, they don't actually in their thinking, especially this government, this far-right extremist, racist, Messianic government doesn't believe in a two-state solution. They do believe in a Jewish state from the river to the sea. Now, President Macron is trying, actually, on his, I would say, timid initiative, because even if President Macron, he's very weak, actually, locally and internationally. I don't think his voice will win in the diplomatic level, especially when it comes to a complex or thorny issue like this one. But he's trying. Nonetheless, he's facing also already severe critics from the Zionist lobby here in Paris. I mean, the media and politicians and some, quote unquote, influential thinkers. But what's the main question here is, it's not about whether President Macron will push for this quote-unquote peace initiative, but let's apply the Arab initiative that was launched in 2002 in Beirut summit by all Arabs, Muslims, and Arab countries, and they were actually joined by other Muslim countries to, again, for the creation of the Palestinian state that will, of course, push to the recognition of the Israel. But the Israelis, they don't believe in that. And there is actually, they said actually explicitly just last winter in the Knesset, they passed a law, actually more than 100 MPs in the Knesset voted against the recognition of a Palestinian state. So it's going to be from President Macron just, I would say, a PR action, and will be some meetings and talks, especially at the UN headquarters, as will be business as usual, and the Palestinians will continue to suffer. But in the end of the day, the Palestinians do understand what's happening and what is going on now. So they will be actually taking care of their own fate, and they will continue to fight. And this is what is happening nowadays, even with all this suffering and this carnage that is taking place. I mean, the Palestinian resistance and the resilience of the people have sent a strong message to the entire world, to the passivity of this world who lost its humanity, that the Palestinian cause is still alive, and the Palestinians will continue their struggle for self-determination, and they will be the ones who will be speaking up. and pushing for the creation of their own state.
Dr. Abdunur Toumi, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you.
Dr. Mehmet Çelik, a thank you to you as well. Thank you for your analysis. It was a pleasure listening to your comments. That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.